Welcome to the Creative Voices of Change, the podcast, where we'll dive into the rhythm of land, community, and creativity through conversations with artists. I'm your host, Anne-Isabelle Leonard. The conversation you'll be witnessing here come from a simple desire to make visible what usually go unseen. We're interested in quiet ways that artists act as change makers, shaping community, nurturing connection, and reminding us on how creativity can act as a powerful tool in upholding the challenges that we face today. We honor the long-term processes and commitments and the courage it takes to keep showing up. We'll share stories of creative practices, of bold yet subtle ideas, and community-rooted visions that remind us that the simplest ripple, may it be a poem, a gesture, or a song, can become a significant transformation. We believe art and the people who create it aren't at the sidelines of change, but at its heart. In today's episode, I meet with Joan Conway. Joan Conway lives and creates in the breathtaking landscapes of northern British Columbia, on the unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Her deep passion for the region's culture and geography greatly influences her artistic work. Joan played a key role in establishing the collective Writers North of the 54th Parallel, which has published 5 anthologies showcasing the remarkable voices of their region. Her poetry has been featured in various journals and anthologies. She published a poetic memoir titled Weave as a River, which explores themes of healing. Her most recent poetry collection, Singing the Night, is dedicated to the youth she worked with at an alternate school. Joan also represented the associate members of the National Council for the League of Canadian Poets and served as a co-editor for the publication Fresh Voices on the League's website from 2018 to 2024. She was the 2025 recipient for the Colleen Thibodeau Award for Outstanding Volunteer Contribution from the League. On that note, enjoy the episode. Hi, Joan.
Hi, Anna-Isabelle.
How are you?
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful to be here in my garden in this conversation.
We feel so excited to have you on board with this first episode of Creative Voices of Change, the podcast. Before we start, I really want you to tell us a little bit of where we are right now, because I've asked you to choose a space where you feel comfortable and a space that speaks to you. So what does this space mean and hold for you?
This is a refuge. We are in town. It's a busy, street, not so busy in terms of urban definition, but this is a place where I come to, just breathe, have a cup of tea, feel, the sun on my face or the birds in the trees, and just be surrounded by, beauty. And so it is kind of an anchoring place for me, this little spot.
Amazing. And did you build all this place by yourself?
Myself and my partner. I dug out the little pond and, have been adding flowers as we go. And it's been a work in progress over a course of 20 years, all of our explorations here on this property.
So you could really feel all the layering of the little attentions here. I see flowers, I see mosaic a little bit everywhere, and painted rocks. It's really beautiful, really peaceful.
It's certainly fun. You know?
I could feel like you've been having a lot of fun here. I was navigating through your website and I found this quote on the front page. And so I figured it holds a very important place for you. And it's a quote that says, "Place has a significant role in my writing, whether it be inspired by immersing my fingers in the garden to grow mammoth lilies or wandering along paths by the mighty Skeena River. These containers fuel my imagination." And how could they not? Living in the wilds of northern British Columbia, any pretense of grandeur is dissolved in the land.
Yes, I truly believe that the land is so powerful here and speaks to all of us. This is how we end up living here and being nourished by the land. I'm a person that needs a lot of space. I don't like to be too busy, and I find that when I walk along the Skeena River, when I'm working in my garden, then inspiration kind of bubbles up. I'm very jealous of that private place. I want to be thinking my own thoughts. I don't want to have a lot of bombardment from the outside world, and being in this magnificent landscape and beauty just fuels some of my inspiration.
And there's this part in this quote that I really would like you to expand on, and it's the part about any pretense of grandeur is dissolved in the land. And for me, it's funny because when I think about containers, I think of a space that contains me, that carries me, and here you use the verb dissolve. I'm curious to know if you can tell me more about that. Like, what are the different pretenses, and how does the land make them dissolve?
Well, I think that's part of being a rural, artist, writer, is in that the land is so magnificent, especially here in northern BC. I kind of, I think of it as a land on steroids. Everything is grand and grandeur, and as you walk along, there's an eagle flying over top. There's the rushing river. There's the gigantic trees. I am just a very small person in a very short life. A full life. But when you think about the life of the river, the life of the trees, all of the entities of our ecosystem, I barely, make a footprint, hopefully, in terms of having a place here. Yes, my ego, my personal identity, my power feels, dissolved in retrospect of this grand place that we live.
It feels like almost a reminder on how, when you say we're a small person within a big, magnificent space, so it's a constant reminder navigating the space on, the reality of our lifespan and of the place that we hold. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And to, keep that in the context of deep respect that I'm here just for a short time. And so how can I honor this? How can I honor this land? How can I honor this place in which I'm very privileged to be a part of?
The word dissolve really spoke to me in a way that it's not used in a very positive way, I find, usually. And so to hear it in this quote, it feels like it really grounds you in something in a process, actually.
The word dissolve all words have such power, they can be, seen as, for their strengths and for their, more subtle qualities. I think that for me, I just get out of my own way, It's like the mind gets busy, chatter, overthinking. And so to dissolve for me is to sink deeper, like a form that separates. There's more air, there's more spaciousness. Sink deeper into what it is that is my intuitive self, those qualities that just need a little bit more space in order to come forward. So dissolve is kind of like also expand, is the other part of it, right?
In your blog, well, I was navigating everything you've been doing. So blog, art, poems, books, even some performance in there I saw. And one thing that keeps coming back again and again are the seasons. And I feel like they hold a very important space in your artistic process. So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the relationship between your creativity and the cycle of the seasons.
I feel as though my relationship with the seasons is, a deeply kind of just attunement, because I spend so much time outside. I have, rituals. Mostly, I have a dog that needs walking every day, which is a blessing, but also I just need to move the body and to be in open space. And so no matter, the weather, the time of year, I am outside, and I see the world speaking to me almost like haikus. I see images, no matter the season, that come in flashes, and I find myself creating little segments of writing even as I walk, and so my relationship with the seasons is exactly that. It is an observation of what is around me and how the land is speaking to me in a moment, and I hold that inside of me. Oh, what a beautiful image! And so sometimes I go home and I have to write it down, and so that I don't forget these things, or I carry it with a notebook with me, and I write down what I see. So I'm paying attention to whatever season is presenting itself in whatever form that I am in connection to the land.
And it's nice because I hear in writing, the haikus are forms of images that kind of, are contained in 3 lines, basically. And I love how it seems that your creativity is driven by a collection of images, yet taking most of the time form in words.
Well, I see that as a beautiful marriage, a partnership. I think that words, isn't it wonderful? We can speak and find the right way of expressing what's in our heart. And then sometimes words can be limiting in that visuals, just give a whole other feeling. And so if the head gets too busy with words, then images sometimes are a better form of seeing the world and connecting to it.
Yeah. Is there one image that kind of keeps sticking with you that you've encountered?
Well, I think that because I walk along the river so much, the river, as an entity, as an image, holds, really fast in my mind. I like to, look at how it flows and actually have a conversation with it. It's like, hello, river. You're moving along. Everything is flowing. Everything is changing. What is happening in my life today will just pass. And so don't get too attached, Joan. It'll just keep on moving. And so I have a lot of connection to the image of the river in my thought processes, and, how it continually changes, and yet its cycle is one of, just reassurance in that it will, continue to flow and continue to emerge in various forms that you can depend on.
The words that you've used being that sometimes you're in conversation with the river. How does one open oneself to a relationship with non-human entities?
Well, I I feel as though I am not separate. I am interdependent. I see the river as, or whatever it is, as having ways in which it can teach me and has, its own wisdom in terms of how does it survive? How does it adapt? How, resourceful it is. And so when I have a conversation, it's also one of listening. What do you have to teach me about my own little life in this grand scheme,
One of my mentors is a performance artist in Quebec called Sylvie Tourangeau, and she told me once, if you need fluidity, go see the river.
Beautiful.
Sit next to water,
Absolutely. Yes, and I see myself, in terms of like elements, I see myself as attuned to the water. I feel as though a water is a very feminine, energy in that it has deep resources. It can find like the lowest cavity and fill it up. It can, fill a container of any size. It has just a relationship that is intuitive in that way, but also dynamic and powerful. And so, I just have a lot of attunement to that.
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot lately is about the word reciprocity. It is a big word. It is a buzzword also that personally I feel like I've been hearing a lot when speaking about addressing a lot of environmental issues, building relationship with the environment and all the, more than human world that is surrounding us. And of course, reciprocity here, I feel like we're talking about mutual dependence, action, or influence, which is what I hear in what you're saying. But I feel like a lot of people around me don't really know what it means to have a reciprocal relationship or where to start, with non-human entities. And so I was wondering, do you think it's possible? I feel like you do because you've been having one with the river, obviously. And what role do you think artistic process hold in building this relationship, if any?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
I think about, for myself, I have a lot of respect and exchange for, the land, and it feeds me, and hopefully I feed it by, in my writing, giving a voice to, either it be in people or communities or in the land, offering a voice to see another way of being. So that is the giving, but the taking, the receiving is how much it feeds my spirit.
Yeah. And what would you say to people that want to build, a relationship with the land, the river, the mountains, but don't really know where to start?
Well, I think starting is by slowing down, finding a place to sit and spend time. Shut off the phone, put away the phone, just look at what's around you and just observe, everything's moving, changing, growing. You could be walking the same path for a long time. The next day, it's completely different. The way the sun is shining on the leaves and branches, the way the air is moving, the currents in the river. One just has to slow down and pay attention. And I think we are naturally going to, enter that place. We just have to, build practices in order to do that.
How do you think art and art practice allows you to get there or to build this relationship?
I have always had, since I was a young child, this curiosity about the world and wanting to, capture both, my feelings about the outside world and my deep internal landscape. Like I feel as though there is, that grand landscape that's outside, but there's also, each of us has, an internal landscape. And so I have this desire, yes, to put that into images and words, both the external landscape and the internal landscape.
It must be interesting. I don't know, I have that when I create art as well. I keep being surprised by what I discover by externalizing certain desire or intuitions that I have onto either paper or performance or music. Do you ever get surprised by yourself?
Oh, I hope to get surprised. I long to get surprised. If I am too fixed into this is how it's going to look. It's the surprises that give a lot of joy. Oh, this is going in this direction. How wonderful, I'm good with surprises. In fact, that's what, to me, says, the piece is alive.
The aliveness of the piece being and having an external life outside of, what you intended it to have is just such a gift, I find.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the reasons why I play with collage and words is, there's a certain spontaneity. I'm not fixed to a certain medium, just have a more fluid relationship with it. And then see, what came forward.
I kind of want to go into a bit of a different direction here. I stumbled upon a quote by Cheryl Sibuliak. Is that? Yeah?
Oh, yes, my dear friend,
there you
Cheryl
go.
Sibuliak.
Sibuliak, that's it. So I'm sorry, Cheryl. She says, quote, on your website, sparse details and vivid imagery give form to many private losses and fears. Speaking about, end quote, speaking about your memoir, Weave as a River. And I was reading also that you speak about the process of coming undone inside of your memoir. It made me think about, do you know the book A Field Guide to Getting Lost by Rebecca Solnit?
I should know it. It sounds very familiar.
Well, there's a quote that I love in her book, which I think may speak to you. She says, quote, leave the door open for the unknown, the door into the dark. That's where the most important things come from, where yourself came from, and where you will go. End quote.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what losing creates for you and what it did create, because your book is about a whole process you've been through.
Absolutely. We have our identities of how we see ourselves in the world. My particular identity was one of, health and vitality, and coming upon, having experienced quite a significant health challenge of breast cancer, made it so that everything that I saw about myself shifted. And so I had to go through a period of, letting go, a loss, a grieving, a personal, crisis in terms of who am I now, to slowly, find, within myself the creative forces to piece together, and to, build another tapestry around how now to be in the world. I thank, myself for having these practices of writing and being a lifelong journaler throughout my year of going through treatment. I was also going along the river and getting a great deal of substance, from, the endurance of the river and how it feeds me. That's why I titled it Weave Like a River, because, the river isn't just a stable entity. In the springtime, it's in full flood. Like, there are massive trees just barreling down it, the landscape is entirely changed. And I felt as though my landscape, my inner world was entirely changed in terms of how, how will I be when, this flood subsides, when this treatment ends? Who am I now? And so, there is going deep down into a dark place, but not a dark place as in deep depression. It's more of not seeing. When I was in Vancouver at the Van Dusen Gardens, I just happened to be, when all the water lilies were in full bloom, and here was this, these amazing flowers. I think of, lotuses, which is not my, this is a common, metaphor. Lotuses coming out of the muck and emerging into, this beautiful flower. There are times in our life where we lose ourselves. We come up against ourselves where everything is different, and it is like going into, the muck of life, and how to come, forward so that we once again can, forever changed, but also embrace a new form of beauty and a way of being in the world.
What did you lose? I'm curious.
I lost this naive innocence that I would just somehow magically live to the age of 99 in perfect health, and and then I might, fall asleep, and that would be the end. It's more like we are very grateful no matter what age, to be alive, and it is a gift. And so it's more like how today to embrace my life. Never mind, 10 years from now, how today to be in the world. So I lost a sense of sort of that I wasn't vulnerable somehow, that I could, like when you're a young person and, you're climbing mountains and, kayaking rivers, it's like there's this great vitality, and one cannot imagine that it will change. And suddenly when it does change, it is like there's a new way of being now, and so losing, which is not it is part of life, our life process, letting go of this false, identity is not a bad thing, because then one can be truly present to a sense of just authenticity and direction in terms of what is important to me. Where is it that I want to, put my attention? Right here, right now.
What a gift.
It is a gift, a huge gift, a huge gift. As they say, the lotus, coming through the dark, definitely coming through some, thick, dark times of having to reshift, right?
Of course, it's a gift that came with a price.
Yeah, with some challenges.
Thanks for sharing all of this. What a journey, for sure. And through this journey, I'm curious because you've mentioned that you were already having a habit of journaling. What is journaling for you, and how did it come into your life? Because I saw your first entries were from 2012 online. Did you used to journal before?
Oh, I was the kid with the little, diary with the key that opened up at, 12 years old. This was a secret place to put my thoughts and words. And I have always, journaled, and it's changed over time. It used to be like a bit of a dumping ground, just like release, just kind of process, and it's like, oh, I'll just put that aside. But now it's more of a reflective practice in that, perhaps there's something that I've read that's really spoken to me, a book that there's a passage that, oh, this really holds a lot of weight. I want to expand on that. Oh, look at that image. That really like sparks something in me. I want to look at that in, a deeper way. So it is a way of, exploring, as they say, my inner landscape. And it's an amazing tool, as well, because when life does present its challenges, how can I get through this? Well, piece by piece, page by page, moment by moment.
It brings you back in the present in some way.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I love that. There's this quote of yours that I found also that I really liked. And it was about this intuition that you talk about, which I feel like this process of journaling that you're describing, what book you liked, some quotes, some things that you saw, images that came up to you. I feel like it speaks to this intuition that as an artist, I'm deeply in touch, and I highly relate to this. And the quote I found was, quote, "The unconscious, sometimes called the muse, leads me in the form of poetry, creative nonfiction, or collage. If I did not head her direction, I would be tripping in the dark," end quote. I find that artists have this calling towards this muse, this voice, and I'm curious because you give a lot of workshops and you work with people that aren't definitely defining themselves as artists. And so how do you bring participants, if you do in your workshops, into being in touch with this intuition, with this muse, to go towards and to embrace? Is it possible for everybody to hear it and to follow it?
Well, I absolutely believe that as children, we have a natural curiosity and, fearlessness into exploring our world. And somehow through our institutions or through trauma, we forget who we are, who our essential natures are as, creative beings. And so I don't feel as though I am awakening something that isn't, an integral part of who people are. It's more, what are the ingredients to nourish and nurture that relationship that people have within themselves? I have, because I'm a gardener, I use a lot of, metaphors around plants. So a couple of years ago, I had this azalea. It was in a spot. It just wasn't growing. It didn't have very many flowers on it. So I moved it to another bed that wasn't too far away, but it wasn't so close to the pine tree that was shadowing it. And the next year was amazing. Like it grew twice as big. It had twice as many flowers, and it was like remarkable. And so I was thinking, sometimes, it doesn't take much to find the elements that will bring forward, a deeper way of blossoming. A friend of mine, Sherry Reedy, she calls me the artist whisperer. I kind of like that term. It's I do feel as though I have a deep desire to bring forward, people's creative selves, the capability to have it grow, to burn inside of them, so that they remember who they are. That is a big part of my passion of having a studio and having people come together and exploring.
I see so many images between, your workshop and your garden, and I love this. And you mentioned the word metaphor, which as a poet and as an artist, I feel like you use a lot. Has metaphors always been there in your life? And what how do they help you walk through the journey of what it is to be alive?
I think we actually, think in metaphors that we don't give credit to. I think it can be a little bit of a, for someone that doesn't write, use poetry, it can be, I don't quite know what that means to write a metaphor. And yet, we speak that language, quite a bit in terms of when we compare ourselves to another way of being. In my river walks, there's a snake, this huge garter snake, that lives amongst the rocks, and I see it as quite a metaphor for my life in terms of shedding skin, coming at life in a new way, sometimes very tender, but also, the old skin outgrows. And so, metaphors exist all around us. It's just a framework in which one uses to describe poetic language.
Yeah, it's crazy how you were talking about, dissolving oneself to make space and then creating this awareness, right, of the space around us. Try to keep reminding myself that if I make space, things will come.
Absolutely. I am a firm believer of synchronicity. I think there's a lot of magic in the world that we can open ourselves to and just pay attention. Even seeing the snake, and thinking about where I am in my life, I see that, that is a powerful image for me at this time in my life. And, some people might, brush these things off and think, that's just life unfolding. But for me, the world is constantly speaking to me, and it's just a matter of tuning into it.
You speak a lot about magic, and I feel a lot of trust in life, in elements and beings that surround you. Have you always had this trust?
I know what works for me and what doesn't. I did live, in the city for a period of time, and I was completely overwhelmed with although there's a ton of stimulation, I felt, like the bombardment of all of the noise and influences. It was, some people, feed on that and thrive on that. And for me, I need to find ways of being and places in my life that allow me to connect with, my inner landscape, and that's where the deep trust comes from. It's like, with age and wisdom that comes from a life of both beauty and struggle. I do trust in that aspect of myself that will just be and respond to what is around me and have a sense of resiliency around just navigating, dark passages while still finding ways to blossom.
It's a shedding, it's an accumulation.
Yes.
There's so many processes that go together to bring you here with me right now.
Absolutely.
I also wanted to touch upon, because you've been talking a lot about this exchange that you're having, of course, with nature, different elements, etc. What's the biggest learning that you've been taught by a non-human being?
I think the sense of resiliency that comes from, the plant world. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily the one big aha, but I do love sunflowers. And my father was a big sunflower grower, and so it is a part of my, my childhood. And I grow them in the community garden, and I love how a sunflower follows the light. And so I feel as though that is an intention that we as well can hold, for ourselves. It's like, how can we attune to, this bright way of being in the world? How can we, with intention, orient our lives to what brings beauty and joy and also sensitivity and compassion. We are in a dark place in our history. There is a lot of human suffering, and so we have a responsibility to, with intention, to be very clear about where we're going and what we have to offer. And so the idea of, like tuning to the light is a beautiful image for me that I've carried for a long time.
And in saying that, what do you think that artists and art hold a role in, helping finding that light and being attuned with this light?
Oh, it's a huge part of how I see, artists in a rural community. We have to create more of the grassroots endeavors to make this happen in our life, because we don't have the resources, we don't have the population. And so there is, the role of the artist, in the rural community, does, bring people together that maybe, in a bigger city you might feel, that we have some different beliefs. I'm just going to keep my distance. We aren't as separate as we think,
Even if we don't have the same opinions or belief system.
And absolutely. And, we all have, a desire to belong. We all have a desire to find our place in the world, and turning towards, creativity, art, what brings that fire in your life, the light, from the sun, what, brings us together, what is it in a commonality as humans, as opposed to, our divisiveness.
Mm-hmm. And art is such a, we say it's a universal language, though when I came to TELUS in the first years, I found that there was a very different language that was used to make art here, which was deeply rooted in the land and the different beings that was constituting the land. I'm thinking, of course, about the salmon, which holds such a important place in the area, but also bear and river and eagle and halibut, all these different beings. So you said that you used to live in a city, and then coming here, did you feel a shift in the language of art that you use and what comes up for you?
I feel very passionate, I guess, and protective of the culture of the North. There's always there's a sense of comparison sometimes in terms of the North in relationship to the, the more urban areas to the South, where I feel as though we exist unto ourselves, in that our culture is unique and vital and has has an equal voice to our, communities to the South and in an urban setting. And so perhaps language is different, but I'm more interested in, in celebrating the culture of the North.
Yeah, I find that one of the things that I'm a little bit confronted to is I feel that sometimes when I go see galleries in art, it's very beautiful pieces, very confronting pieces at times, and both in the North and in the South. I do feel that in the North there's such a relationship to, as I was mentioning, to land, and that one of the first things that I that I caught myself thinking when I came up north at first is, oh, they're just talking about the environment. They're just talking about the bears. They're just talking about salmon. What about, humanity and our issues and everything? What would you, I'm curious to hear you about that, about like, how does one, move into putting an importance on the small things, or what is considered small, but then, as you said, the land is magnificent and massive space where we dissolve, but I feel like it's being pushed away either in national parks or up north in different areas, and we're kind of, pushing this environment away from us. How do you think we can reconnect to the importance of the small things, quote unquote,
Well, I think that, part of what you're doing, as far as creating these little documentaries is providing a voice so that it can have a bigger audience into the outside, communities. Are our urban cultures separated from the land? Are they creating works of art that are more, intellectual processes, or are, perhaps, our urban counterparts can grow from being more in connection with the land, so that our earth is not in such dire straits. Our earth is suffering, our waters, or the air, our resources. Perhaps if urban personalities, sensibilities stepped out of that culture and made a deeper connection with the land, then their heart would open up to, what is at stake here?
Yeah, and it's it brings you back to what you were saying about our inner landscape, and I feel like I've learned so much about my inner landscape and coming in different various landscapes in the world, but also in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have a question for you before we head into the final last 3 questions of this episode. And I feel like we've been talking a lot about change and about impermanence, vulnerability in life and in the life journey. And so I was wondering, what does leaving a trace look like for you? And what does the word legacy mean to you as we speak right now?
Throughout my life, I have honored, the voice that says, in my everyday world, what wants to be brought forward, what wants to be created. And so perhaps, as I age, it's more with an intentionality of, as I say, just being clear around what it is that speaks to me, so that, I'm not being distracted, by what's really not important. And so, I hope that through my, relationships with my children, with my grandchildren, with my community, with how I have touched people with my workshops and with my Artist Whisperer self in terms of supporting people, that's going to be what lives on when I'm no longer here.
Well, thank you so much, Joan. That was such a lovely conversation, and
absolutely,
it went places for sure.
Did.
And so, just to wrap up, we do this at every episode to share a little bit more of your world with the listeners. We're wondering, what's a book that changed you and why?
That's a big one. I would say, as a young woman, I read the diary of Anais Nin. She was a French writer and, just published many, many diaries. And to me, she gave a real credit to her inner process at a time when there was no memoir writing genre. So when I read her as a young woman, it definitely influenced my lifelong writing of journals, and using sometimes my journals in my writing as well.
The second question is there an artist or an art piece that changed you, and why?
Well, when I came to BC from Northern Ontario when I was 19 and I landed in Vancouver, I went to the art gallery and there was the permanent collection of Emily Carr. In Ontario. You know, I was familiar with the group of 7, all male, painters. And so when I came upon her work and learned how she traveled up the coast, to these remote villages with her monkey and was very, eccentric and followed her, her passion and fearless, wow, look at what she created. Look at the magnificent landscape that she portrayed. That was, that is very powerful. And that was a real awakening for me.
Yeah, because you ended up in those remote villages
Absolutely.
yourself.
And I didn't think, at the time I was in Vancouver.
I honestly love that. You never know what's going to have an impact on your life.
You never know.
And the final question for you is there any projects that you want to share with the listeners, or maybe a story or an anecdote?
There's lots of stories and anecdotes.
I'm sure there are.
One thing, okay, so I'm going to make a connection again with nature. In my studio, outside the window is like this diverse, group of trees. There's a birch tree, but there's also a stand of poplar trees. I love poplar trees because their roots are interconnected. They grow as a community and they sustain each other. And so, when I think about our own creative journeys, it is within community, it is in relationship, it is in our sharing and our coming together and support that we grow as humans.
And if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Well, I do have a website, and
which we will share.
Yes, and I have a studio, which I have, cards, and so and of course I have, my blog and my. Here we are. I live in a bright green house.
There you go.
To spot me. The fluorescent green blossom.
I love this. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Joan, for your time and your great generosity in sharing your stories, and I wish you all the best for your beautiful summer coming up.
Likewise. Thank you, Anna Isabel.
Thank you.